Hi guys, with a new video, and this video we're going to talk about the best specs you can play in PvP in 10.2.5 in Dragonflight. We're going to talk about 2v2, 3v3, solo shuffle, and even RBGs, and I'm going to do a melee version of it. Why? Because first and foremost, it's going to be still a very long video because I'm going to talk specifically spec per spec, which I think is the best to main currently, even through nerfs and buffs, for different parts of the game. And if I did that for all the specs in the game, it will be like over a 2-hour video. I might compile it at one point, like all the videos together. Why not? But for now, I'll do just like a role per role. So we have melees, ranged, and then healers, or I do healers second and then ranged. And then we can just compile them all together if people really do want a video like this, like a very long video. But anyways, this is the melee version, and there will be some timestamps. Hopefully you do watch the whole video because I think it's still valuable information for people that look into having new mains, having new alts. I think the season will be still like 1.5 months long, so we'll have enough time to push rating and push glad or push legend or push whatever objective you have, even it's duelist or even it's just rival. Those are legit achievements you can have, and it's better to do so with a spec that you will love. Anyways, it's quite an intro, but now let's talk about spec per spec. I'll try to regroup classes together so it's easier to make timestamps. But anyways, let's start right away. We have S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier. I want to explain first and foremost what I mean with S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and D tier. S tier means that it is God tier in all aspects of PvP. So 2v2, 3v3, also RBGs and solo shuffle in mind. It cannot be God tier in every single thing, but it's God tier at the point where you can be versatile and have a lot of success with all kinds of PvP. Then we have A tier, which is a bit less than God tier. You are good at, for example, 2v2 and 3v3, but you're awful at solo shuffle or you're awful in RBGs, for example. And it's like a sort of like equilibrium, sort of balance you have with that. And B tier is, for example, it's quite good, but also still average. It's good at one part of the PvP world, I would say, like for example world PvP, but it's very bad at RBGs, or it's very bad at soul shuffle, it's very bad at something, right? And that is going to make it like very balanced at the B tier. Then we have C tier, which is again the underperformers. They are like performing on one aspect and it's very niche. And that's it. And D tier, it means that it is very bad at all aspects. I'm going to spoil you guys. I don't think there is like one spec that is going to be D tier, at least not from what I've seen in melees. But again, I'll try to rank them like logically. I might just remove D tier and do a C tier, for example, only. But we'll have to see. Now let's talk about Arms Warrior first. I am main Arms Warrior, made guides about it, made videos about it. So again, if you want to like have a guide for Arms Warrior, I made multiple ones, even for 10.2 and 10.2.5. I have a meta guide and even a fun guide if you do want to have a fun build, which has a lot of crits, for example. Arms Warrior is actually very good. It's, I would not say meta in any aspect. I think I can know and see multiple better specs at 2v2, better specs at 3v3, better specs at Soul Shuffle, better specs at RBGs, better specs than a wall PvP. But I would say Arms Warrior is performing very well in every single aspect. In 2v2, it is actually one of the better specs out there that has some good comps. It does get crushed by some specs out there, like for example Sublety Rogue. He can just like duel you, and even if you die by the sword, you can still die through sheep shots, for example. I think it's also very difficult because you're playing a dampening spec in 2v2. You're not going to win from the opener. That's not always going to happen, except if you're playing versus double DPS, for example. So you're quite good, but you're not extremely good. In 3v3, it's the same. You're quite versatile. You are a menace in at lower elo, I would say, and becomes lesser and lesser the higher you go because it's easier to outplay your arms warrior. It has clear strengths and weaknesses. If you're playing as a resto shaman and someone blaze storms, you know that he's playing hurricane probably. You can static field totem and move him away while he's blaze storming, so he gets a lot less value on his blaze storm. You have a lot of things that you can actually do to stop an arms warrior, which I think is still a important spec out there in threes, so it does very well. The same for RBGs. I think having an arms warrior is very important because, again, having that sharpened blade, which is one of the best MS effect that you can have in the game. Maybe Fury Warrior has a better one, I think, overall, like with Slaughterhouse, but it's very hard to stack in RBGs. Or you have, like, again, the Shiv from Assassination Rogues that can also be a good, like, sharpened blade effect, I would say. But sharpened blade is still the best MS effect out there, and that can always land kills, and especially in an environment where you don't have dampening, it helps to land kills. So it will be regarded as one melee that is pretty much like mandatory in multiple comps that you can play in RBGs, but also it's a great shot, like target caller in general. If you have a target caller in your team, it's often the arms warrior, and the arms warrior is like a vital like element in a comp, most likely in most comps. In Soul Shuffle, it's quite good. It gets countered by a few specs. It gets like demolished, I would say, in certain lobbies. But you have lobbies where you can actually be very prominent, and you are auto-winning some lobbies as well. Again, I'm an arms warrior. It's very frustrating to play in most lobbies because, again, you can be kited around, your healer is not positioned correctly, so you cannot push in, and if you cannot push in, you're just a victim pretty much in those lobbies. So the healer has to push in with you, but if he doesn't do that, well, it's either you're lining him and it's bad for you, or you are trying to stay in line of your healer and you don't have pressure. So there is like a few things that are making it not like S tier good, but I would say it's a good spec you can pick up and still have a lot of like effectiveness, and you can not easily, but you can achieve your goals if it's like rival, duelist, elite, or even legend. You can achieve that as an arms warrior. It's not like it's not like the spec is that bad that you cannot do that. You can just pick it up, learn it, watch a guide, and you can always be better and better at it. So with that in mind, and World PvP, let's talk about World PvP really quickly. You can find a group, do some sparks, you can have fun with that. 1v1s, you're not going to win everyone. Again, I think World PvP is pretty much who charges first kind of wins these days. You have like tools out there, you have some self heals, you have some good shields with Ignore Pain, you have Double Blaze Storm, which is quite nice as well. It's not the best performer as well, but again, I think World PvP is like the least important thing I would discuss right now. But I'm still going to discuss it so you have the broader picture for that spec. I think Arms Warrior, as how I portray it right now by like talking with you guys, I do feel like it's an 8-tier spec in all kinds of PvP. And that's not only like the power level of a spec. I would even say that it is an 8-tier spec to main a arms warrior. I think if you main a arms warrior, you already have the certainty of having a great class first and foremost, because I think warrior in general, you at least have one spec being good at PvP, which is arms more likely than fury, but sometimes it is fury over arms. That is a certainty, and a fail-safe spec to play, to perform in 2s, in 3s, in Soul Shuffle, in RBGs. You will always find groups in general. If a healer plays, often or not, they would like to play with an arms warrior because it has a lot of defensives, it has intervene, it has die by the sword, it has banner if you're playing like PvP talents in 2s or in 3s. You have multiple comps that you can play in 3s. In Soul Shuffle, you're pretty much like a great class, a great spec in general. They're not never going to be feeling bad that you have an arms warrior in a lobby, for example. So I do feel like it is an 8-tier spec. I would highly recommend to main one. It's also a very fun class to play, and it's not easy to learn, but it is like the first steps as a warrior is like instantly a win for you. And the better you become, the more aware you are, the more like rewarding it is to play a arms warrior. Now let's talk about Fury now. It's already a very long video, but again, I'll try to go in depth about those specs because I feel like it's very important to have a broader idea on those specs and classes. Fury Warrior, on the other hand, is a not that great spec right now. I'm going to talk first about RBGs. I think you have terrible consistent damage, which you were actually known for at the start, but it is now like completely out of the window. You're pretty much like a Odin's Fury Avatar Go machine. Once you don't have that, the damage is really low. Your slaughterhouse in RBGs is very hard to stack because it gets overwritten by everything that has an MS effect. So except if you are the only one in the whole group, which is not something you want to have, you will never have like a lot of value on slaughterhouse. You can also have AoE slaughterhouse and such as with like whirlwind and rampages on everyone, or with Odin's Fury now also stacking like 4 stacks whenever you're doing that. So you have ways to stack it on like AoE, but it's like less reliable than arms. Your defenses are also quite poor. Again, like enraged regeneration is better in RBGs, but like that are in arenas because it doesn't have dampening, but it's still like no real parry. Like it's not like you're ignoring damage. You're still going to soak up damage. You also have less utility, and in general, people will just tell you to go arms, which I understand. In 2v2, you are actually quite prominent. You have some people actually like top of the ladder that are Fury Warriors. I would say that it is the best PvP mode for like warriors in warriors in general, because again, arms warrior it has like for Fury Warriors, excuse me. So 2v2 is the best PvP side of I would say PvP World of Warcraft. It has great okay damage like burst, and it is like a setup kind of bracket. You kind of coordinate CC, and then you do your go, and they will pop CDs, and then you try to survive until you have your other go with another CC rotation, and you can win games because of that. It's not like consistent damage is going to be a thing. Slaughterhouse is way easier to stack there because nobody's going to break that. Defensively, enraged regeneration is not that good, but you can win games just basically because of your MS effect being like 36% at all times. So that's a good thing. 2v2 is a good bracket for a Fury Warrior. But then on the other hand, you have 3v3 where you're pretty much like getting carried most of the time if you're playing. And trust me, you are getting carried if you're playing Fury Warrior and you're playing like any other like comp. I would say Fury Warrior, they would be pairing ideally with a caster, so you actually left alone, you do your damage, and your caster is actually trying to do CC for you so you can actually win with your burst rotation, which again is very highly easily kited. You don't have a Blight Storm, you don't have like a CC, anti-CC ability that, for example, Arms Warrior could have. Your damage is really predictable as well. Every time they see you like swing with Odin's Fury, they know the damage is going to come. While a Arms Warrior can sometimes just do overpower, and then Colossal Smash into a more strike. They're not going to see that coming. So you have more preparation to that. So I think it's way more difficult for you to actually enjoy your time in threes. You can still do that, but I would say since you have like a other spec, which is Arms Warrior, it's most likely you're going to play Arms Warrior in threes and Fury Warrior. So that's like a negative for me. Soul Shuffle wise, you have some good lobbies, you have some terrible bad lobbies. Dampening kind of ruins your self heals by a lot, and that's your only defensive. You don't have a lot of utility. You're pretty much a worse DH. That's how I see right now for Fury Warrior. You kind of have the same properties as a DH, but you don't have the CC and the defensives of a DH, or even the mobility of a DH. I think the DH is really hard to kite like a good one. You can kite if you're like a hunter, you can still trap it and such. You need roots to stop DHs, but for Fury Warriors, you don't even need roots. You need just a good slow and being able to give distance. And a root can just stop them, but trust me, a good snare is sometimes enough for a Fury Warrior because they don't have like I'm going to remove everything button, like for example Glimpse has for DH. I think in general, if you compare both, you're going to feel inferior, and you are right now. But the good thing is about Fury Warrior is you have a better, I would say, brother, which is arms. So you could always like respec for a bit and then go play Fury whenever you're going to do twos, which I would do in your like if you have a choice, you can play twos as a Fury Warrior and then anything else play arms. That's how I would do. Currently, I'm only playing arms. Basically, I'm sometimes playing Fury, but every time I'm getting slapped on my face, and then I stop playing Fury for a bit. But I would say, with everything in mind, World PvP is probably also the second best for Fury. So you have 2v2 being the best thing for Fury. And then you have World PvP, which is going to be okay for Fury Warrior because you can win 1v1s because of Oni's Fury Rampage into Bloodthirst or Bloodbath or whatever. You can just win because of that. But in arenas or in RPGs or BGs or whatever you're going to do with a healer that is going to heal your target and CC you while you're trying to do your damage, it's very difficult. So with all and everything like combined, I do feel like I want to put them in B tier just because they are like good at 2v2, but I'm going to say like, is it enough compared to the other specs? I would say it's C tier. C tier because 2v2 saves them. If 2v2 was not an option and you're only thinking about social for threes, it is D tier for me. But I'm going to say, look, if you do mind 2v2 and if 2v2 is important for you, I do feel like Fury War is not that bad. So for me, Fury War is C tier and the saving grace is 2v2. Now let's talk about DKs. I want to talk about DKs first. Let's talk about Frost DK. So Frost DK is interesting because I would say that in RBGs it is highly slept on because it does a lot of damage. It's actually very like hard to stop a Frost DK in team fights. He's also a great like shot caller and team like a target caller if you have like one that is capable to target call, it's going to be a huge win for you. Has a lot of disruption, has a lot of AoE damage. At the end of the match, you will see them often topping the meters, and the pillar goes are like lethal. If you have like an arms warrior together with you, and he has sharpened blade, your main target, you often can just get kills. And you're one of the rare specs that actually can kill a healer just with like CC alone. You can just like blinding sleep them into a AoE stun, into then a strangulate, into then maybe another stun or asphyxiate or whatever you're going to do. And with that rotation, you can actually just land a kill with your whole team. I do feel like that's the saving grace of RPGs for Frost DKs. In 2v2, it is kind of crap because you don't have MS first and foremost, and you don't have defensives as well. So you're bad at surviving first, and you're very bad at making people like die over time. So the only saving grace you have is winning in a go, and you are dependent of your healer playing very aggressive. So you could play with a preservation evoker or with a restoration shaman, and you can win with, let's say, a blinding sleet into AoE stun into strangulate go. The issue is you have a lot of specs that actually just counter you too hard. Holy paladins can just free them themselves and run. If they know what's up, they are going to free them themselves. They can actually just throw a judgment and dispel the strangulate they're actually affected on. It's actually very strong because of just a PvP talent. He can judgment you and he's dispelling a magic effect, a disease, and a poison. And since the only magic effect you are going to do towards the paladin is actually the strangulate, and since you can cast it while silenced, you see the problem for Frost DKs. Then you have also like I would say disc priests that actually dome directly, for example. You have also resto druids actually very hard to catch if they know what's up. They're not going to show until you're going to do your go. And they will pre-hot themselves and their target. It's way easier to die versus a Frost DK in 3s than in 2s, for example, because you don't know which one is the target as a Resto Druid. But in Resto Druid 2s, you can actually hot both of you and still have a lot of mana, a lot of effectiveness. I think 2v2 is not really a great bracket for you. It does also show in the ladder. Then we have 3v3, which again, people are going to say play Unholy DK, but if you don't want to play Unholy DK, you have some comps that are okay for you, but you're going to struggle because of communication. Communication is actually the bane of your existence, because if they communicate, they know how to rotate CDs to survive your go. And then you're a bit like dependent of devastation. Evokers actually doing a lot of damage. You have a lot of things to have to take into consideration. You're very squishy. The armor nerf is ridiculous that they did it for Frost DKs as well. They were already squishy. They're even more now, especially with the amount of arms warrior you see on the ladder, or even just like outlaw rogues or windwalkers. You're going to get eaten alive. That's the problem. And with this current meta, getting eaten alive in a dampening meta is very bad, because if you're not winning in early, you're not winning in late as well. Well, there is nowhere near like a space for you to win like all the time. You will have to win on goes, like on setups, and if you're not winning on setups, well, you're going to lose. Then you have world PvP. I think it's not that good because you don't have like sustain. You can do your go, but often not a trinket can just stop it. And you don't have a reset that well because you don't have a healer behind you. So that's why double DPS, Frost DKs is not like fantastic as well. World PvP, not fantastic. And then we have Soul Shuffle, which in my opinion, Frost DK can perform, but it's very hard because people are like stunning your targets, and you don't have a vanish like or a celebrity rogue. You cannot reset whenever you want. You can kind of see yourself as a celebrity rogue. The more stuns you have on your team, the less important it becomes for you to do your goes, which effectively you're asking to get like carried pretty much, and you're asking your teammates to not stun your targets in general. You can creep a Frost Decay very easily, but the same as like a sub rogue, you just stun the targets and they don't have anything to put their foot on. So I do feel like Social Fight is very tough, and since I said like everything is tough except RBGs, I would say that it is between D tier and C tier. I think it's lower than Fury because I think RBGs in my books are not equally important as 2s, 3s, and Soul Shuffle. But one day with Solo Queue RBGs, if Solo Queue RBGs comes out, like the real one, Frosty Case will be like way more interesting to play there. But until then, for now, it is not really the case. Why it is not D tier? Because I do feel like the people that do care about RBGs, they can actually love Frost Decay. It just is hard to have the stigma out of the way that people ask you to go Unholy Decay. They never really notice the amount of damage you can actually do and proceed and produce as a Frost Decay. You're one of the best offensive classes as well for flag maps. You can decimate a garden druid by yourself. You just need like teammates that heal you and like a tripled grip into a full CC rotation. You can actually just destroy a garden druid, for example. So just for that, I do like the C tier spot for them. I do. Again, if D tier, nobody's D tier, then I would say like Fury and Frost Decay are probably the worst of the bunch. But I do feel like my opinion is Frost Decay is a bit worse than Fury because of the importance of RBGs in my mind. Again, if you do find RBGs way more important, it might be higher for you on the list. But that's why you should listen to the whole video so you understand the points I make for every single spec. Now let's talk about Unholy Decay. Unholy Decay got nerfed, so you will see a lot less of them on the ladder. Do I say it's like a nocebo kind of thing where people play worse because of a nerf which is not really that important? It feels like the armor nerf, again, it is quite huge. It's 7% more damage, I would say, versus physical damage dealers. But it's not like outlaw rogues are running rampant. It's not like arms warriors are running rampant, or feral druids, or survival hunters, or like I would say BM hunters they are, and windwalkers as well. But it's not like automatically going to make you like D tier, right? So for me, if I do, since I've played a lot of like games on like 2s, 3s, RBGs, Soul Shuffle, whatever, I did play everything since the patches. I would say that Unholy Decay is still strong. It just is less face roll right now. So people have to know when to kite and when to try to go for a go and when to try to do for damage and such. I do feel like Unholy Decay is still good. I would say it's the better spec for DKs in 2s. I would even say it's a better spec in 3s, probably also for Soul Shuffle. I would say for RBGs, Frost Decay I prefer it than Unholy Decay. Unholy Decay is special because it is really on the brink of another nerf, unfortunately. I still think it's very strong, and because of the multiple pairings in threes. Let's talk about threes first. Um, Unholy DK Windwalker very strong. Unholy DK DH very strong. Unholy DK with SP very strong. Unholy DK with Elemental Shaman very strong. You have a lot of very strong comps. And that's probably the Unholy DK with BM Hunter is extremely strong. I would say it's probably the better Unholy DK comp to play in because it's very CC heavy and the damage is really heavy as well. And it's also more fun in my opinion. But Unholy DK suffers from that because people are going to see the percent of victories you have as a Unholy DK, and they're going to say Unholy DK is busted, while I would say the comps are busted. And the pairings of S tiers just make like for a S tier comp pretty much. Unholy DK is very strong, and you have to understand that they more likely will not get the buff. So it is how it is played right now. It will be played until the end of the expansion probably. So that you should note for yourself. In 3v3, you're a good spec, a very good spec. I would say it's a meta spec. I don't think it's a god tier spec right now, but it's a meta spec. It is one of the most popular melee specs out there with DH and with Windwalker. Arms Warrior is also very popular, but the higher you go, the less you will see. That is just how it is right now. And DKs have defensives that are, I would say, the same as Frost DK, but for some reason it is more tanky. I would say it's because of the necrotic wounds, which heals you for a bit. I would say it's also harder to stop an Unholy DK there goes because it's like kind of invisible like Arms Warriors whenever they're doing damage. It doesn't seem like they're really activating something. They're doing damage. That's it. It's not like you have a weak aura that can save you from an Unholy Decay. While you can have a weak aura for Frost Decay saying Pillar of Frost and you know you have to press buttons. For Unholy Decay, they can just do Apocalypse every 45 seconds, or they can do a Death Coil like proc from Sudden Doom and do a lot of damage as well, or they're spamming just their like Clouding Shadows and still like popping festering wounds on you and do a lot of damage as well. So that's one thing that is very cool about it. It has damage at all times pretty much. It doesn't have like extreme consistent damage because that's gone since you don't have like the pad damage from before with your pets or with your diseases. You're either playing disease spec, which is a bit of pad and okay damage, or you're playing like more of a burst orienting build where you're playing around your festering wounds and whatnot, and your death goals and where you've clouding shadows and your ghosts, whatever you can with your dark transformation if you spec into it, or with let's say your empowering rune weapon with also your unholy assault, for example. So you have some things out there for you in threes. In twos, I would say it's a better spec as for DKs. I already said that. It's not that bad. It just is you have a lot of counters, but it is not bad. You have some rep on the ladder. You can win games because of necrotic wounds and because your CC. You have the same CC as a Frost Decay, although you don't have an AoE stun. You still have like Asphyxiate, which is also a stun. I would say in general your damage is very hard to counter, and you can win just with dampening, or sometimes you can win with a setup. So you have choices. I would say with the healer you can play aggressive, or you can play for dampening with a resto druid, for example. So that's that. RBG's already discussed it. I think Frost Decay is better, but you have still a place. People still want you to play Unholy Decay more than Frost Decay. But I would say it's misplaced judgments from what they have seen in arenas from a Frost Decay. And then World PvP, I would say it's alright. You're faring a better chance as an Unholy Decay than a Frost Decay, that's for sure. And in Soul Shuffle, you are still a very good spec because of how good you pair with other people. Unholy Decay is one of the specs that has one of the most variety in comps. You can play with a caster and do very good. You can play with a melee and do very good. You can play with like again a setup spec, like for example a rogue, and do very good as well. So I would say Unholy Decay is a very good spec to play in and to be performing. I would say it's probably not as versatile as Arms Warrior, but if I have to compare with Arms Warrior, they have better peaks. For example, in threes, I think Unholy Decay is better than Arms. But I do think in 2v2, Arms Warrior is better because of the consistency that it has. I think RBGs as well, Arms Warrior is better. But I would say in Soul Shuffle, Unholy Decay is better because it has better tools to deal with like shitty lobbies, like for example, Castle lobbies. So for me, it's going to be A tier on the same level as Arms Warrior. If you want to main an Unholy Decay, it's a great thing. It also has like a little brother, I would say, like Frost Decay, where you can always hop in and have fun with it. But I would say the serious spec is still going to be Unholy Decay. The one thing where I would say you're going to have difficulties is the amount of GCDs you have to press to do damage as an Unholy Decay, and if you don't like that, it's maybe not for you. But if you like the more CC oriented melee that just tries to control the game, do damage, and try to win over time, or with a big go, or have like a sneaky go where people don't notice that they're going to die, I think Unholy Decay might be for you. Now let's talk about Windwalker. And Windwalker is actually surprising because it's not like something that I'm going to play per se, although I would say that it is a really good one, a really good spec. But it's a spec that is like buffed and then nerfed and then buffed again and then nerfed and then buffed again and then nerfed, but still is relevant as one of the better specs right now in PvP. Especially, I think, for me it's a S tier spec in Soul Shuffle. Let's talk about Soul Shuffle first with Windwalkers. Soul Shuffle, you have crazy damage, crazy CC, you have crazy mobility, you have kiting potential. You can actually avoid a lot of damage if you know how to avoid damage. You can literally play as a warrior in some lobbies, and you can play like the smallest fly, very hard to hit in other lobbies. You are quite good versus classes as well, and you're also quite good versus melees because Fist of Fury just makes you parry. It's like a die by the sword on a 30-second CD or 20-second CD. I don't know. I don't even remember how much the CD was for Fist of Fury, but it's still a not that important CD CD like duration time. It has crazy damage. You can win from nothing. People don't understand how they can defend themselves from Windwalker. I'm not saying it's an easy spec though, because it's most certainly not an easy spec. I think it's squishy enough to make you have to understand how to use defensives. But I don't think it's like the hardest spec either. So if you want to learn it, I think it's possible. It's very possible actually. And right now it has a playstyle where you're not really a hit and run spec anymore. So that might be also be appealing for a lot of people. In threes, I think you have some crazy comps available to you. You can play DH Windwalker, which is one of the most played like comps right now in 3v3. DH, like I would say DK, like Unholy DK with a Windwalker is also very fun to play and also very strong. It actually just like kills a lot of specs, like just because of you two existing together into a lobby. You can also play with a caster. You can play with elemental shaman. You can play with a destruction warlock. You can play with an outlaw rogue, and it's disgusting the amount of CC you can actually provide to each other. You can play even with an arms warrior. You can play with anything really. Windwalker, you can actually replace any warrior spec with a Windwalker, like any warrior comp with a Windwalker instead of the arms warrior, and you can actually have a good comp. It's strong, and it also shows in the ladder. I think right now it's one of the most flavor of the month spec out there with DH. It cannot overtake DH because Windwalker is still very specific. Not everyone wants to play a Windwalker, and I do understand why. Personally, I'm not like really a fan of Windwalker. I do have fun sometimes whenever I'm playing it, but it's not like something I want to main like full time. I don't want that. But threes, very strong. Twos, it is extremely strong. You have like really lobbies where you can just like press W on the healer and you are going to score a kill. That's the kind of feel you can have. It's not a dampening spec, but you can play as a dampening spec because of Rising Suncake having an MS effect, and you have a lot of buttons to press defensively to actually rotate their offensive gameplay. It's a very strong spec overall. Has a lot of damage. Their like modifiers are not on a very big CD, so you can actually do multiple goes. And overall, 2v2, you're going to have a great time. In World PvP, you have enough defensives to win. Touch of Karma is really annoying. So it's annoying to deal in 1v1 because you want to break it, but you don't want to break it. First of all, the damage that you can return is very high. Your mobility is really good, so you can actually go and run away, and it's a very strong spec overall. Um, RBGs though, I think it's not the best. I think anything if you have a windwalker in your team, you can actually replace it with a warrior, and you would have a much better team. That's my opinion. Um, but yeah, I think RBGs is the thing that is going to lower their stands. I think on the tier list, but I don't want to judge like RBG is too big. Like I said, in my mind, it is not as important as twos, threes, and soul shuffle. So I would say it is an S tier spec just solely because of those three. And then you have RBGs, which I would say, if it's important to you, it would be more around B tier. If really RBGs is something important to you. But again, for me, 2v2, 3v3, and soul shuffle is way more important. And I would say that just because of that, it does deserve S tier. It is a very versatile spec. It has a lot of fun in all aspects of PvP. I would highly suggest to main one if you are someone that wants to play a new spec, a new melee spec, and have a lot of success with it. You have a learning curve on it, but you can learn it. Most likely, you're going to get nerfed though in the future, if they do still nerfs until War Within. But for now, it is an S tier spec, and I would highly suggest to play one right now in 10.2.5. Let's talk about rogues. I think we have 3 specs to talk about, so I'm not going to try to do too long about them because I think they are very similar in a lot of aspects. Let's talk about Assassination Rogue. Assassination Rogue in 2v2 is a great spec, has a lot of comps to play in. You can actually perform very well as a Assassination Rogue. You have some counters here and there. Most notably, there's Subtlety Rogue, you have to go for the healer, for example. But you can win with dampening. That's very important. Not only for dampening, but you can also win in openers. But you can win better than a Subtlety Rogue in dampening. In dampening, Subtlety Rogue can win as well, but it's not their game plan. But the Assassination Rogue, they can do that. And that's actually very important for a spec to be good in 2v2. In 3v3, it's a bit less interesting than Outlaw Rogue and Subtlety Rogue. It doesn't remove the fact that it's good overall, because again, I think RPS is still a fantastic comp, although you're like very killable, and that's the issue. I think Assassination Rogue, it could be summed up with it has less defensives. I think that's the best way to portray Assassination Rogues. If you're comparing to Outlaw Rogues and Subtlety Rogues, you would just say Assassination Rogue is too squishy. It is a squishy spec. It has a lot of issues in the defensive department, or maybe not. Maybe it's the normal thing for a rogue to be squishy. I think it should be that way, even for Subtlety Rogue and even for Outlaw Rogue. I would say Subtlety Rogue could be a bit more squishy, give them a bit more consistent damage, so at least they are not like feeling bad whenever they have to run away with the only defensives they have. But I think Subtlety Rogue is way too tanky compared to Assassination Rogue. And I don't think Assassination Rogue needs to have more defensives. I think Subtlety Rogue just needs to be tuned better towards Assassination Rogue. The same for Outlaw Rogue, to be honest. Everything that has CDR, which is cooldown reduction, that's how I call it, CDR, it's very strong to be able to reduce the CD on your defensives, also your offensives, but mostly your defensives. Being able to do an evasion every 45 seconds, every like 35 seconds, every 40 seconds as an auto rogue is enormous compared to Assassination Rogues. The same for Cloak, the same for Vanish. That's the only thing that actually makes them go on the backseat. But the good thing is about rogue is you have 3 specs. So if one spec is a bit like of an underperforming in threes, you can always play auto rogue or you can always play celebrity rogue and learn it and try to get better at it. And then you have soul shuffle where, to be honest, since you have a Kingsbane like burst, you can always win without going for a full bleed kind of build where you're like getting destroyed by a bob, for example. But you're still a very squishy spec. I do feel like just because of that, you're not like extremely good. You have some good damage, but damage is not always everything. And the CC is okay, but I would say it's also more difficult to do some good CC as an assassination rogue compared to a subtlety rogue with shadowy duel or outlaw rogue with their grips into a sheep shot into then a kidney and then a gouge and then blind. They can always do the same as assassination rogue, but outlaw rogue has CDR, cooldown reduction, which is going to facilitate all the things that I'm going to say right now. And then you have RBGs, which, in my opinion, they're going to always ask you to go Celebrity Rogue. And the only reason why you would play Assassination Rogue is if it's got Mugu or if you're playing like a double rogue setup where you have a Celebrity Rogue defending and an Assassination Rogue for team fights, which is very fun to play, but it's not meta right now. So it's not bad. It is good. It is still a rogue into a RBG setup, so you will always find groups. People just look for good rogues, so that's not a problem. But I don't think it's like that crazy compared to a subtlety rogue. I think if a assassination rogue defends a node, more likely they're going to lose it, like 8 times out of 10 versus a druid, for example, like a bounce druid. And even worse if it's a bounce druid with a subtlety rogue together attacking you, like impossible to win time versus that. But then world PvP, I would say it's a rogue spec. 1v1, you're going to win most matchups as long as you are the one facing the defendant and you are the aggressor. You can always win, but you're less defensive. So obviously, once your defensives are gone, you're dead. While outlaw rogues and subtlety rogues, they have tools, I would say, to survive. So just based on that, I would say it's a B tier spec. It is average, not average, but it is good to average on multiple modes. It is not crap, but I would say like it gets outshined by multiple specs in multiple facets. In 2v2, you're strong, let's be honest. You're stronger than an arms warrior, for example, but you are less stronger than a sub rogue or outlaw rogue. 3v3, you are very squishy. You're going to get carried in your comps pretty much. You can carry the games as well if you're damaged, but you're too squishy to be reliable in those matchups, especially in dampening where you want to dampen the team, but you don't have the tools to dampen the team. So for me, it's going to be B tier based on that, and then social flaws as well. It's not that like it's not crazy. You can win games, but you also lose games like very easily as well because of the defensives as well. You're very easily switched on. You're very easily killed, and you cannot rely on the assassination rogue to survive most of the damage. And again, that's pretty much why it is B tier right now. Now, if we talk about outlaw rogue, to speed it up, 2v2 it is way better. It's, I think, top 2 in my mind. Top 2 or top 3 spec in the game, like overall. And it is very strong in dampening. It has some burst tied to it. You can win into a shadow dance, for example. The damage is actually crazy as well. The CC is crazy. Your defensives are crazy. Most people are carry games, like for gold or for money. They play outlaw rogue. They are all playing celebrity rogue right now. You can cheese games as a celebrity rogue, but outlaw rogue has really a safe way to be performing in twos. In threes, RPS, people play outlaw rogue these days. I would say it is the most meta spec for rogues. It will be seen in AWC. All comps wants to play outlaw rogue except subtlety rogue with an arcane mage, for example, with then a resto druid. That is a good comp as well. But most people will play outlaw rogue because of the CDR, because of the damage that you have. You have more consistent damage as well. You're a bruiser kind of spec. You're squishier than Shadowlands, but you're not squishy as an assassination rogue, so you're going to perform as well. I would say in Soul Shuffle you're going to be faced with the uncomfort of not having communication, which is quite big, but you can win games. I've seen a lot of Outlaw Rogues actually performing well. The issue is the difference between a very bad one and a very good one is like the space between Europe and America. It's really big. But once you have learned your ways to play Outlaw Rogues, it can be performing very well. In RPGs, I would say it's better than Assassination Rogue, but still, it is not as good as Subtlety Rogue. With all things considered, I would say Outlaw Rogue is S tier in that domain. 2v2, it is crazy. In 3v3, it is crazier than the A tiers, I would say. Soul Shuffle, it's the only black spot I would say for Outlaw Rogue, and that's the only reason is you have to learn how to play selfish and alone as an Outlaw Rogue in comparison with communication in 3s or in 2s. But once you have learned that, you can actually perform very well as it. It's a very strong spec. Although the ladder representation is not showing, I think it's a very specific spec as well. Not everyone can pick up and do good on Outlaw Rogues. Also, it is playing with a different build than Assassination Rogues and Subtlety Rogues. So most people play Sub and Assassination Rogues. They will have like a difficulty to switch onto Outlaw Rogue because they want to play crit, while you are wanting to play mastery, like full mastery, which is not something you ideally want to do as an Outlaw Rogue right now. Subtlety Rogue, I would say right now 2v2 you are a very very good spec. I would say probably the most safest spec to play. It is like really unkillable. It's very hard. You can win games because of CC. You can win games because of your burst rotation. You can win games by just pressing a spell cast sequence. It is a very very good spec. In 3, on the other hand, I think it's like more limited, especially comp wise, and you have to outperform your enemies way more than they'd have to do with you. So that's one thing. I think overall Subtlety Rogue, they're like the best spec in RPGs. Like everyone needs a sub rogue in their team. In 3s, you're alright, like I said. You want to play with arcane mage, you want to coordinate with communication. And Soul Shuffle, I would say it is on a downward trend because of the healer meta, because of your nerves, because of the extra HP, which makes it more difficult to eliminate someone in the shadowy duel. But I've seen some crazy sub rogues still do a lot of games very well in Soul Shuffle. So it's nowhere near terrible. I would say overall, if you're like really counting every single aspect of PvP, World PvP, you're a king as well as sub rogue, so just play that. It's also going to be very fun. But overall, 2v2, Soul Shuffle, 3v3, RPGs, and World PvP, I think it's a S tier spec just based on that. I think the only thing you have to realize is it is not as easy as it pretends to be. So you have to learn your spec, you have to learn the ropes of your spec, you have to improve on it and know every single situation you're in to be a better sub rogue overall. You are also very easy to grief. I guess I'm going to put them at A tier then. Because I think Soul Shuffle, you're easily griefed, and 2v2 and 3v3 because of communication, it's alright. But in Soul Shuffle, you're griefed, so I don't think it's like the Uber spec of there. And since RPGs is not weighted as much as Soul Shuffle, I do want to put some separation between Outlaw Rogues and Subtlety Rogues. But overall, if you're like maining rogues, you have Outlaw Rogue, Subtlety Rogue, and Assassination Rogues all like top of the tier list. So there is no reason to not play a rogue spec if you do want to play one. Now let's talk about Feral really quickly. I think Feral Druid is not an easy spec to play. I think in 2v2 it's one of the better brackets for you because you can actually just do your thing without like getting stopped by 3 guys. In 2v2 you have Cyclone, you can do pretty easy cyclones towards the healer or the DPS. so you can have a lot of feral frenzy, and it does show on details the amount of frenzies you're going to do. Overall, I think it is a great spec in twos, but gets countered by a lot of specs, like for example, Sovereignty Rogues, DH. Again, it's very hard with Cleave because you're very squishy. If they go for the healer and you want to go for the DPS or whatnot, it's very difficult to survive that Cleave, and it's also very hard to heal one. So based on that, still not extremely good. 3v3, I think it's very frustrating to play Feral Druid because you're very killable. But you can win games because of your comp. You can play like with an unholy DK, you can play with a mage, you can play with a warrior, Kitty Cleave for example. You can play jungle with a BM Hunter, that's also very fun as well. So you have ways to play a Feral Druid, but again, it's one of the specs that are too squishy to rely, and you have to be an extremely good Feral Druid to be able to outperform a lot of the meta specs for now, for example. RBGs, non-existent, I'm going to say. People are going to tell you to go bounce Druid. You can still do some games here and there, but it's like nowhere near a sub rogue, so you cannot like sit a node and defend it. You're not a garden druid, so you're going to like die very quickly. You're not a team fighter as well. You could team fight, but it's like not that effective depending on the comp you're playing. Based on that, I would still think a soul shuffle as well. Let's talk about soul shuffle. Very squishy. You can win into the chaos, but it's a very hard spec to climb because of the squishiness. You have to rely on your healer, and relying on healers in soul shuffle is never a good thing. So based on that, and the information I'm going to give, I do feel like it's a C tier spec. No, I would say, I mean, it's the same as Fury Warrior. 2v2 is the saving grace, then you have 3v3 Soul Shuffle being like a dud, and the same for RPGs as well. I would say C tier, maybe ahead of Fury, maybe very close to B tier, but I do feel like, again, I said the same for Fury Warrior, so I have to kind of put them on the same tier. Although there is a separation, I still think they are on the C tier, like underpowered specs. Survival Hunter. You're very good at twos. You're a hunter spec. Like trap is fantastic. You can kite a lot of the damage from a DH, for example, or windwalker. Your damage is very high. You keep on getting buffed as well, so I don't think they're going to nerf survival hunter, so that's a good thing. Overall, I think survival hunter does a very good job in twos. Probably top 4, top 5 best specs out there, but it does get outshined by BM hunter, which is a separate video right now. But Survival Hunter is going to be a good spec for twos. In threes, you have some comps that you can play, like Cuphead, you can play with a Windwalker, you can play with a DK, you can play jungle as well. You have some comps out there, but you're still very squishy, and pairing yourself with another squishy DPS is not always going to be very good. So your healer will have a lot of job, like work to make it performing like other comps. But the space is still there. Soul Shuffle, you can actually be thriving a lot with a Survival Hunter. The meta is actually in your favor. The issue is learning how to survive and knowing how to survive and knowing how to make your spec be better than, let's say, the other enemies in front of you. So Soul Shuffle, very strong. Trees, very strong depending on the comps. And then you have RBGs where it's like pretty useless. You don't want to have a survival hunter in your team. I want to still think that in threes in Soul Shuffle, it's still a very hard spec to play. It's not an auto win. You have to work for your wins. And just based on that, with Soul Shuffle in mind and threes, I do feel like it's a beater spec. Maybe ahead of Assassination, to be honest. It's really a spec you want to main though. I made a video like a tier list for like mains and alts. Which one is easier, which one is hard. I do feel like Survival Hunter is one of the hardest to main overall. It's easier to play BM, so the temptation is still there. But overall, I think it's a beater. It does deserve a beater. I think it's a good spec. It just is not fantastic in anything you're doing. Let's talk about enhancement. Enhancement Shaman is terrible in twos because of like no MS, dampening, so your healing is not that effective. Um, Kiting, you're very much kited, like very easy as well. You're easily killed as well, so it's not fantastic in twos. In threes, you have like two great comps, which is with a windwalker or with the arms warrior. Those two turbo pretty much. That's the saving grace of an enhancement shaman, but that's it. Once the other parts of the comp is gone, enhancement shaman itself, it doesn't have a lot of synergies like with other comps, and that's why in social flow it also struggles. It's also easily trained. The meme is really real, like train blue, and blue is the class color of shaman right now. And enhancement shaman is really a easy spec to just like play, but be worse than other specs that you should play like overall. Soul Shuffle, not that great. I think you're most likely to target most of the games. You're not fantastic. Your burst is okay, but it's very hard to connect. You're easily kited, easily killed, easily pushed towards the limit, and just because of that, it's not that interesting to play. But also RBGs, it's not like a fantastic spec as well. It doesn't have space for enhancement shaman. I think in solo queue RBGs you will see enhancement shaman actually pop off, but right now enhancement shaman is not that great. So that's why I'm going to put that in the C tier spot. I would say ahead of Frost Decay, beneath Fury. It doesn't have a lot of saving grace except threes. And in threes, it's pretty much of the comps and how they play, and you might be carried because of that. It's a good spec, but it has multiple issues that needs to be addressed in the coming weeks or next expansion. Retribution Paladin 2v2, you are not that bad because of like utility, but you're still bad because you don't have a MS effect. You're all right, I would say. You can climb because of a double TPS comp or because of a healer comp. Um, it's going to be hard to land kills, especially versus resto druids, for example. Resto druids are going to play at 40 yards, so it's very hard for you to actually hodge them, and it's easy to see the resto druid being able to outsmart a retribution paladin. In threes, you have some comps that are going to be very good, but I would say the comp that you want to play is Cupid. It is a very good spec. Right now, with the buffs that they got from damage, it is showing as well. I think the one thing I'm going to say, this is not God tier, so it's not like 3v3 is going to save like everything from Paladins. Right now, I think Retribution Paladin is a good spec in threes and in twos. I would say in social fall you are going to have very good lobbies and also very bad lobbies. And in RBGs, our Retribution Paladin is actually very much seek like they seek one in their comp. It does a lot of damage. Hodge is very annoying to deal with. You have like AoE blind as well. Searing Glare is also very strong in RBGs. Overall, it's a very good spec. Wotlk PvP, also very good. Bubble, Bob, you can often just win in 1v1 because of that. So that's also a very good thing. And did I talk about Soul Shuffle? Let's talk about Soul Shuffle. I think it's a very good spec as well. Has survivability. Doesn't have self heals or off heals, unfortunately. But overall, I think Retribution Paladin has some better matchups than worse matchups, and you can be on top of your game as a Retribution Paladin. So I'm gonna put Retribution Paladin as an 8 tier spec because it is like Warriors, good at everything but not excellent at anything. DH, Havoc Demon Hunter. I'm going to put them in S tier because it is not surprise. It's really no surprise. I think DH in twos is fantastic. Probably top 4 best melees right now. Depending if you're seeing Celebrity Rogue or not. It has some great comps. It can win dampening. It can also win in the opener. You have great CC, great defensives. Overall, big W for DH. Threes, again the same. They are the most represented melee in the game, also with the most comps to play with, but also have crazy win rates with it. Overall, DH is very strong, and you should probably brace yourself for one of the biggest nerfs you're going to get in the near future, if they're going to nerf still, like bouncing wise. RBGs, the same as arms warrior. You want to have a DH in your team if you're playing like a melee lobby, like a melee party. But in general, I think DH is fantastic. In Soul Shuffle, the same. I think the defensives are too big for a DH. It's very hard to just kill the DH and go for them because they just are going to cleave you. Overall, they have the defensives, they have the utility like reverse magic, also very strong, and I would highly suggest you also main one. I think if you want to help and try to get like your results, I would say, and your goals, I think DH is one of the specs that are going to make you achieve that. And the same for Soul Shuffle. I think it's a very strong spec, does a lot of defensives, does a lot of damage as well. You can carry games by yourself with CC and the damage. A Blur is a 1-man CD. Darkness is very big CD, but it's also very notable. Whenever you are going to blur like Darkness intelligently, you're going to win games that were normally lost, for example. And I think DH in general is a huge S tier, so that's why it is S tier right now. And this is a tier list, so it has been a very long video, and that is the reason why I didn't want to put healers and ranged as well, because again, I wanted to explain in depth about PvP as a whole, so you also understand like every single spec and what's up with it. I'm going to remove this row because I think this is pretty much accurate. There is no one that is really truly garbage. You have just specs that are good at certain parts and better at others, and then some specs that are just good and like excellent at everything, and that's why they are S tier or A tier. Again, you can take it seriously, you can also take it a bit less seriously, because again, what does 2v2 have to do with the tier list if you're not playing 2v2, for example? The same for RPGs, the same for Wotlk PvP, the same for 3v3 or Soul Shuffle. It will depend on the eye of the beholder, the importance of the tier list, depending on the placements and such. Again, it's a very long video. Hopefully you did watch everything, so you don't have too many questions or like question marks on the tier list and how people are placed versus each other. But I stand by it. I think overall this tier list is probably accurate for, like I said, 2v2, 3v3, Soul Shuffle, RBGs, and even Wotlk PvP. And I can't really see a spec being misplaced right now. Maybe you will tell me in the comment section below. Please do tell me why, and if you have listened to the whole video, so I can actually like counter your opinions with like some, I would say, opinions of mine. Again, thank you for watching this video. Really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. I am tired. This is a very long video. My voice is gone. I'm actually super sleepy. So again, thank you for watching the whole video. Thank you for the support, and we will catch each other probably very soon in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.